Does anyone want any Wheaties? Eating Raoul is one of my favorite movies ever, and it represents almost everything that I love about film as an art form. It embodies both what I value in terms of a film's production and of theories on how films interact with the viewer and creator. Most egregiously, it is severely underrepresented in regards to critical discussion and analysis. So naturally, it is the goal of this video to correct that. It is important to note that this video will not be or contain a plot synopsis of Eating Raoul because I do not see any value in that kind of analysis. For those who have not seen Eating Raoul, there is a rip of the Criterion Blu-ray available on YouTube as of the time of writing this. Link in the description. Instead of being a synopsis, this will be a holistic piece analyzing everything about Eating Raoul that I find to be meaningful in regards to its greater themes. The reason I regard this analysis as holistic is because each individual point makes greater sense in the context of every other point. So I will send them to you. Eating Raoul was written and directed by Paul Bartel and co-written by Richard Blackburn, and released in 1982. Made on a budget of $9,290, adjusted for inflation, it was a moderate success at the box office, grossing $2.9 million, once again adjusted for inflation. The film was mostly forgotten about until the Criterion Collection announced a release of it, and even now it still isn't frequently discussed. The Criterion Collection's release of Eating Raoul is fantastic, and the special features provide a great context into the film's troubled but fortunate production. I could only do a worse job summarizing the production hell this film went through, so I strongly recommend that you do go check those out for yourself. The most interesting point for the purposes of this analysis is when Paul Bartel states, and I paraphrase, that he believes people read too deeply into Eating Raoul's themes, and that the film is just a fun sex comedy. I am aware that there is somewhere out there thinking that this completely invalidates my analysis because the director, the auteur behind the film, said that it isn't as deep as you think, bro. However, I believe that this thought is unjust because when viewing a piece of media, I like to think of it in terms of death of the author. For those who don't know, death of the author is a theory written about in Ronald Barthel's essay of the same name, and it states that an author's intentions and biographical facts about said author should hold no weight in the artistic analysis or interpretation. I feel this is important in analyzing art because art is inherently personal with the consumer of it. For a more credible example of why this theory should be used is the anime classic Neon Genesis Evangelion, the creator of which, Hideaki Anno, has stated on multiple occasions that fans of the show look for meanings that don't exist. To see why this statement is completely and utterly fallacious, just type in the YouTube search bar Neon Genesis Evangelion Analysis or Neon Genesis Evangelion Explained and prepare to be greeted with hundreds of thousands of results to the contrary. So, why even mention death of the author? Well, because if I didn't, I'd have to write this paragraph in the comment section when someone brings up this interview. With that out of the way, we are now well suited to move into the analysis of Eating Raoul. Post a comment if you want Wheaties. Eating Raoul serves a delicate critique of capitalism, conservatism, and the perception of sex. The main characters serve as representations of a conservative mindset, which is fitting considering that Ronald Reagan was president at the time. Capitalism is compared to primitive impulses, primarily sex, food, and of course, money. The opening narration and storyline of the film make this very clear. How sex is presented in the film is used to visually express each character's experience with it through the use of filmmaking and camera placement. The couple sleep in separate beds. This is used to characterize their sexual disinterest, and it is later stated in the film that the couple finds enjoyment in others' company. This is later reinforced when Mary directly states that they are in a relationship for reasons that are not merely sexual. This element is used in the story as a way for Mary and Paul to look down upon the swingers and feel superior to them, because Paul and Mary view themselves as possessing dignity in this disgusting world. For evidence of this feeling of superiority, look no further than the film's dialogue. Another expression of this can be seen in Paul's wine collection and how he believes cheap wine is a waste of money, only being useful for giving people stomach aches. While Paul and Mary believe they are superior to the swingers, Eating Raoul seeks to also point out the hypocrisy of this idea by having them achieve their goals of opening a restaurant by murdering them. This relates to the idea of capitalism being represented by sex, food, and money. Moving on to the point of capitalism, Paul and Mary use a sexually explicit ad to attract customers to gather funds for their restaurant. This further reinforces in the film that these three are intrinsically tied together. The film's ending is possibly the strongest reinforcement of this, with Raoul literally being consumed by the effects of his sexual affairs and the capitalistic need for money. Finally, the film's portrayal of sex is very important to Eating Raoul. Wide shots are used to communicate a character's enjoyment of sex. This is why the swinger parties are all shot from more pulled back, distant camera angles. As a result of this, more nudity is visible on screen. The inverse of this is true of the rape scenes in the film, which are shot closer to the actors. A perfect example of this is the relationship between Mary and Raoul. During the scene when Raoul and Mary first have sex, or at least are implied to have had sex, the camera is positioned at a wider angle, showing more of the full bodies of each character. During the second time in the hospital, Mary and Raoul are covered up, and the camera is positioned much closer to the two. The contrast is very obvious. In the conclusion of the film, Mary says to Paul that she was initially raped by Raoul, which the presentation contradicts. You can read this as either meaning that Mary found the experience pleasurable but didn't feel that she truly consented, or you can read it as further reinforcing the conservative aspects of Mary's character, not wanting to admit to enjoying a sexual experience. It should be obvious I find the latter far more interesting given the context of this analysis, but if someone were to read the scene as the former, I wouldn't blame them. And that, my friend, is my analysis of Eating Raoul. If you actually watched Eating Raoul for the purposes of this analysis, it is safe to say we can be friends. If you had already watched Eating Raoul, it is safe to say that we can be friends. There is a lot more I could talk about in regards to Eating Raoul, but I feel what I'd be saying would be redundant, because explaining the film's troubled production and restricting budget are best experienced by watching the special features on the Criterion Blu-ray. The goal of this video was to both analyze and expose Eating Raoul to more people, and I feel if I have done either of those, I have succeeded. If not, well, at least I finally had the opportunity to write my definitive piece on this film. Bon appetit, and thank you for watching.